Welcome, loyal listeners and noobs, to Buck Life, the hardcore Milwaukee Bucks podcast made by hardcore Milwaukee Bucks fans for hardcore Milwaukee Bucks fans and just fans of the NBA in general. I am Jake Anderson. My co-host, as always, is Chuck Schilling. How we doing today, Chuck?
Not too bad. You know, it's a beautiful, sunny, early November day.
60 it hit today.
Yeah, weather is nice. Can't complain. Can't complain about life in general, but the Bucks off to an 0-2 start, which I know we're going to hop into pretty quick here. And so in terms of my Bucks fandom, maybe not the best, but other than that, good.
And for the first time today, we're going to have two special guests. They're both repeat offenders on the Buck Life podcast. First off, to my right, Mr. Dan Helsel, a.k.a. Grand Admiral Dan, a.k.a. Ray Allen Hater #1, a.k.a. the leader of the Ultimate Fan Squad, now it's the Cream City Clash.
It is
great name.
Technically the Cream City Clash. I don't know what else to say about that name, but
I don't think we talked about it the last time you were here because they hadn't named it yet.
It hadn't been officially named, so I couldn't say anything at that time. But
thoughts on that, real quick, before we introduce our second guest?
It's hard to not it's hard to not improve on Milwaukee Bucks Ultimate Fan Squad, but they accepted that challenge. And somebody thought like alliteration, maybe Cream City Clash, but really you usually want the C's to all have the same C sound, and they don't. So, it's still, the section is still going to be the same, and people are still going to call it the Fan Squad, or a lot of
it's
people
Squad
call it
6.
Squad
That's
6.
all it is. Sorry, it will always be Squad 6.
It's always Squad 6 in my heart.
They do. So, we'll see how long the name sticks, but there's some good things going on with it.
The second game I went out to a bar with my wife, to a bar that didn't have the sound on, so I got to watch the game without sound. But the first game, I did hear you guys. It was nice to hear you. Even with a large sellout, I think it was a sellout crowd for game one.
It was a listed sellout,
yeah, exactly.
But there were a lot of empty seats in the upper deck. The lower bowl was very full.
Yeah, it looked like a good crowd, and I could still hear you guys, despite having a very good crowd on opening night, which we'll talk about that too. Our second guest here today is one Luke. He was on the very first episode way back in the day. We have since changed the name of the podcast to an official name. And our second guest today is Luke. How you doing, Luke?
Doing good. I would have kept it Ultimate Fan Squad. Step Y.
UFS
Luke
for
wasn't
life.
a fan of that.
Luke was a proponent of the Ultimate Fan Squad.
It was
name,
so
and
bad.
Eventually, he convinced me that was the best way to stick with, because I through a couple internal emails, the suggestions that we had to choose from, none of them were better than Milwaukee Bucks Ultimate Fan Squad. But we'll see. I mean, Clash. Supposedly,
Wait, so you're implying that this was like a democratic thing? Like you guys actually got to choose the name, and that's what they chose? I'd like to see what the other awful names. Like I'm a wrestling fan, and Stone Cold Steve Austin, when he decided to change his character, there's this infamous story about he got this list of names that they gave him, and one of them was Fang McFrost, Baron Von Ruthless, like just awful names.
Yeah, so he picked the worst one.
Yeah, obviously. It's Fang McFrost all the way. But did you guys choose Cream City Clash?
No, there was a list of 5 during last season, because it was well over half the season had been gone, and we still hadn't
know these other
still
names
hadn't
that
had
they
a
had to
name.
pick
And
from.
there was some input that we could give on those 5 names, and the response just turned out to be like, okay, none of these 5 names are any good. So.
Well, Stan, I would have gone maybe like a Dragon Ball Z type thing, where you just add a new adjective each year. So you have the Ultimate Fan Squad, then like the awesome
Super
Ultimate Fan Squad, then super awesome Ultimate Fan Squad. And just blow this thing up. You got to get to level 9.
I just want to point out, you can't
Over
see it.
9,000.
This is not a video podcast, but the look on Dan's face is priceless right now. I mean, he looks like he's at a funeral.
Well, look, the fan squad is very near and dear to me. I've been at, helping to lead the section since we started it, and I've been to every single game. So hopefully the Cream City Clash name will grow on me if it is kept past this season. And I will say that the Bucks are very committed to the name right now. So we'll see.
You know, my personal thought, the name is not all that important. You know, the fans are going to be there doing what they do, and that's really, to me, the important part. You don't... to me, it'll always be Squad 6, but other than that, you know...
It is interesting when we have to describe it to people, because if you tell people the Cream City Clash, they have no idea what you're talking about.
What kind of weird shit are you into?
Yeah.
So in the description, we say it is the Milwaukee Bucks fan squad, and then they say, "Oh, okay, they know what that is." So
yeah.
Well, I'm glad we have a little levity here to start the podcast, because it's going to be a lot of doom and gloom, I think. Maybe a little bit.
This might be a dark episode.
It's an earlier, it's early in the season, but...
for those of you listening, we are recording this podcast directly before Game 3 of the season, just so you can know where our mindset is. We don't know what's going to happen in Game 3. Maybe they're going to win. Maybe they're going to blow Toronto out. They're going to look good, and we're all going to be feeling a lot better in about 4 hours from now. And then we're going to watch the Packers beat the crap out of the Broncos. But right now, it's pretty dark here. And we've got the lights on in my basement where we're recording.
We don't know how that game's going to go. It's the 0-2 Bucks going into Toronto to take on the 2-0 Raptors. By the time anyone listens to this, the game's going to be over. And maybe Grievous Vasquez will go back to Toronto and actually show us that, okay, maybe he's not a bad player.
Fire up the tank. Anyways, so let's start off a little bit of arena news. It was finally revealed that construction on the new arena will not start until spring of next year, thereby delaying the opening of the arena to the following year of 2018, which I was corrected. For some reason, I thought 17.
Nope, 18,
So, I mean, what are you guys' thoughts? It's tough because I think I told Chuck this the other day. If I could time travel from a year ago to today, the me from a year ago would slap me in the back of the head for me being all down about the arena being delayed a year because, what the hell? We're getting an arena. Stop bitching. But it still is kind of disappointing to hear. I mean, does that kind of dampen any enthusiasm for you guys?
I know that the one thing that surprised me, I personally don't care that it's delayed a year, but the thing that surprised me is that they didn't have plans before we approved public funding. And one thing I was wondering from you guys, have you ever heard of that happening before?
My thought was just maybe that the plan all along was that it wasn't going to open until 2018, and that's why we never saw more renderings than just I think we got 3. We never saw any inside renderings, and that maybe it was just a ploy to try to get people to get moving on this thing.
Because my excitement stems from seeing the plans now. I'm excited to see what it's going to look like when it is done. So.
Well, being very involved in the process, I can tell you that they definitely were trying to get it open for the 2017-2018 season. You have to remember that one of the reasons why we need this arena in the first place, as stipulated by the NBA, is because of the revenue streams that it provides way above and beyond what the Bradley Center does. So an extra year of that at the front end was very desirable.
Right.
It's also potential maintenance. The Bradley Center's getting old, and there's all the talk about how much maintenance the Bradley Center needs.
The Bradley Center loses money.
Exactly. So, you making more money on the new arena plus not losing money on the Bradley Center, I think you're right. They definitely wanted to get it done. I'm not terribly surprised by the news, and I'm not disappointed at all because to me, I want this thing done right. I want it to be exactly how it needs to be, the best. When it opens, I want it to be the best arena in the NBA at that point in time. And obviously, there'll be other teams building new arenas down the road and will be surpassed. But the day it opens, I want it to be the talk of the NBA.
Right, and I'm very confident it will be. And this makes me more comfortable that we're not going to have to rush it as much as we were going to. The owners had really wanted this approved through all of the various governmental entities much, much earlier, and they expected it was going to be approved much, much earlier than it was. It wasn't until September 22nd that Mayor Barrett signed the city portion of the funding, and that's way farther down the timeline than our new owners had expected. So that really put us in a time crunch, and that's why one of the larger one of the minority owners with the larger role, Mike Fascitelli, who's kind of spearheading the arena construction project for us. He had been on record as saying he didn't think anymore that it was going to be able to open up in 2017, 2018, and this is why. There's just a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of plans that have to be approved. But to one of Luke's comments, it is very typical for you not to have the finalized plans because you have to get an exact location approved first, and that's what happened with the Bucks. We had a couple different arena sites that we were looking at.
Right.
When we finally settled on this one, there was still the issue of
are we closing 4th Street?
Right. That's part of it.
There's still, I think, even now, there's still unanswered questions even now.
They've actually pretty much settled all.
Have they settled? Okay.
But the thing is, it's too late. Like this just all got settled. Now we're sitting here November 1st.
I also think, you're looking at we're in the Midwest and you can have some brutal winters. I wonder if that played at any kind of factor in that. As far as the construction goes, it's easier to do in spring than it is and if you're trying to make your hayway and really get the footprint all laid out, it's probably got to be a lot easier to do when the weather's better.
It is. There's
because look at Wrigley Field. I remember they had because it was a way colder winter than anticipated. A bunch of their bleachers. A lot of their seats they couldn't sell because they weren't when they did the renovations. They weren't done by the time the season started. So again, you're probably right that you'd hate to run into that where. All of a sudden the season's here, and then, we're not quite done with the arena yet. So
there's a lot of the groundwork that they're going to have to do. Digging up the existing land, cleaning that up, laying the foundation. That stuff is definitely not ideal for cold weather. You can lay cement and all that in the winter, but one, you're paying more because you have to pay a premium for it, and two, you can't do it every day because if there's snow, whatever, you're just not going to. Certainly I think if you don't have some of that groundwork done prior to probably November 1st. Actually, I know for a fact through people I've talked to, November 1st, if you're a cement layer, whatever they call themselves, the price to lay it per square foot goes up November 1st. And we're basically at a point where it's better to delay it to the spring at this point.
If they could have done groundbreaking in mid-October, they would have done it just to get the 2 weeks in October, November, and most of December. They would have actually been able to make some progress there, but at this point, they're just going to wait, and we're going to wait. And like I said, it makes me more comfortable that they can take a little bit more time because we still need to actually see renderings, and they can take a little bit more time with their plans and get it right.
Fair enough. There is a positive that I want to talk about, not with the new arena, but with the current arena. Before we move on, there's a new concession item at the BMO Harris Bradley Center. It's a cheese curd dog. I'd only heard it in passing, but this is a hot dog with cheese curds in the frickin' bun. I haven't gone to a game yet, but I'm going to make sure it coincides with my cheat day for my diet, and I'm going to be all over this. Dan, you haven't had it? Anybody had it?
Nope. I've not been to a game yet, but it sounds...
sounds Wisconsin-y. That's a great stereotype.
Yeah. There's sometimes you get things like that, and they're just a gimmick, and you taste it, and it kind of lets you down a little bit. So I will try it at some point this season, but I'm not going to get my hopes up too much because I've had similar things. I've had bacon-wrapped cheddar hot dogs, and they always sound better in theory than they are, in my experience.
It's like the State Fair syndrome.
I've never had good food from the Bradley Center.
I've had a lot of good food from the Bradley Center.
Zaffiro's doesn't do it for you?
I haven't had it lately, but I will say one thing that this new ownership and management group is focused on is enhancing the experience at the Bradley Center while we're still there. And, now that's going to be an additional season. But.
Well, and I know Luke's a fan of them. They've got Solomons at the Bradley Center this year. Yep. They're a new partnership, so you can at least get
Fat City, bitch.
A Solomon's cheeseburger.
On the 400.
Yeah. I know, Luke, I know you're a fan, and I know you used to eat there all the time and when you worked downtown, but maybe now you're ready to have Solomon's again. I know you kind of got sick of it for a little bit working. Yeah. When you work right there, I understand. And they do have a Qdoba booth, but it's not
Qdobes.
It's not Chipotle, so you're not going to get E. coli. You're just going to get food.
They also a new item for fans of the Greek Freak, we have the Greek Freak Euro.
Ooh.
I'm not a Euro fan. Yeah.
Some people like Euros.
I'm not a Euro fan. Especially lamb to me I'm not a big lamb eater, and that's typically how you make Euros. But and I don't know if this one's lamb or if maybe it's beef.
We're now a cooking podcast.
I do want to say I forgot to mention this when we were talking about the arena. We do have an arena-related event on Saturday, November 7th, the next weekend home game. Yes, it's sponsored by Play It Forward Wisconsin, the arena coalition that Save Our Bucks was a co-founder of, and Milwaukee Tool. It's going to be downtown on Old Road 3rd Street and 4th Street before the game.
On the 7th, right?
Yep, on the 7th, leading up to the 7:30 p.m. home game that night. There'll be a lot of good stuff to do down there. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Oscar Robertson are coming back into town. Mayor Barrett told me personally he would be there.
Kareem and Oscar, I was
now that I know Mayor Barrett.
Now that Mayor Barrett's going to be there,
superstar,
I'm sold.
Well,
I'm going to try to make it to that event. That's the last time I remember there being any kind of Bucks tailgate. It was in the year we drafted Brandon Jennings, the first year of Squad 6, and man, that was a great time. It was small, but it was we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was a fun time.
I chugged a beer on camera in my Rally Rabbit hat.
That was the original Squad 6.
The crew. Well, I guess we can talk basketball now if you guys want.
I mean, we were trying to put it off as long as possible. There's Yeah, I don't want to.
As of today,
you get dark. I'll try to be the voice of positive and reason.
Well, I mean, that's kind of just who I am.
Yeah. That is true.
As of now, we're 0-2. By the time most people hear this, I mean, everybody hears this, we could be 0-3 or 1-2. I mean, so not a great start. But first, let's talk about the home opener. I have in my notes here just what the hell, brah. I wasn't disturbed by the loss. I wasn't angry by the loss because I didn't think they were going to win being so shorthanded, but to me what was the most disturbing was just it looked like a lack of energy. It looked like this was some game in the middle of February, but this was the home opener. People are jacked, people are ready for this, and after what happened, losing to the Bulls by, 60 points?
54,
thank you. Dan's got a photographic memory. He's great for that shit.
I was there. I was traumatized.
Well, yeah, I think I tried to put it out of my memory, but, that's how the season ended last year, and then you start with a 25-point loss to the lowly Knicks on your home floor.
Yes, I tweeted out 79-point deficit in those 2 games in a row that counted.
So, what the hell happened? How did they lose that badly? I mean, granted, you have no Jabari, but you knew that going into the start. You knew you weren't going to have Giannis. I mean, was it on coaching? Was it just on lack of energy? Was this, are the Knicks maybe better than the Bucks? It feels weird to say that.
Well, I mean, as far as the Knicks go, Carmelo Anthony is back, and I've never been.
He was a non-factor.
Huge
this game,
fan
though.
of Carmelo. Non-factor production-wise, he only scored 11 points, but he's still you're concerned about him on every possession. And they do have a rookie that I was very high on and still am, Kristaps Porzingis. He's just a physical presence, and we were trying to
got a big dome.
We were trying to defend him with Chris Copeland, who's a little undersized and has about a 1-inch vertical, so that was
not the most athletic guy.
And Robin Lopez was a big addition for them in free agency, and I still don't believe in their coach, but yes, the Knicks are much better than they were last year when the Bucks beat them 4 times. So that's part of it, and the Bucks just were missing Giannis, or probably the key player that we have. But it does concern me that the supporting cast, which a lot of people rate highly, was not able to do a better job.
Can we talk about Michael Carter-Williams, too? I mean, I remember just... It wasn't just the fact that he had a ton of turnovers. These were unforced errors. I mean, just simply loose handle, losing the ball without anybody really even contesting him. What the hell was going on with his game? And he was shooting jumpers left and right. I get it. You're missing your jump shooters from the game, but if that's not your game, you don't just decide to add it.
Yeah, I'll say I wasn't that discouraged by the first game. You asked the question, are the Bucks worse than the Knicks? And I would say without Jabari, Giannis, and Mayo, the answer to that is probably yes, that they are worse than the Knicks. So that doesn't disappoint me that much. The lack of effort, like you said, is what disappointed me. And I didn't get too down on Michael Carter-Williams for that game because he was missing probably our 3 top offensive options besides Greg Monroe. So when you look at it, and Chris Middleton, but when you look at it, he didn't have a whole lot to do. You want to run your offense a lot through Jabari, a lot through Giannis, and then a lot through Moose. And when you only have one of those options, and Carter-Williams has to kind of elevate himself to a higher spot in terms of generating offense, you might get some mixed results. So
that's a question, though, that I think Jake was kind of getting at. Like, does he? Does Michael Carter-Williams have to do that? Like, it's not a positive.
Yeah.
It's not.
I think, to me, the biggest concerns were both the lack of energy, and they seem to be out-hustled, and lots of unforced turnovers. Michael Carter-Williams being the main culprit, but there were other unforced turnovers, and a lot of them that game. I didn't look at the box score to see the total turnovers, but the good news was in Game 2 there were less turnovers. The energy seemed better, but through 2 games, my biggest concern is the defense. We were giving up 120 points a game, and I don't know what needs to change there because... Yeah, I'm at a loss for words, and I hope the coaches have a better idea than I do, because that is my biggest concern is the defense.
Well, a lot of us, myself included, have been very sold on the Bucks' defensive system and schemes that are really the Sean Sweeney, our assistant coach. He's really the person in charge of that. I believe he's 30 or 31 years old. He started off as a video coordinator, and kid pulled him up onto his coaching staff with the Nets, and he brought him along here. And there's a great piece, by the way, in Milwaukee Magazine on Sean Sweeney if you want to get to know about him a little bit. No. But,
damn. And a man-thon.
No, he's definitely an up-and-comer, and that's the question I have. Like, how effective would our defense be without him? Because I don't know how long we can hold on to him if we're going to keep Jason Kidd long-term as well. But one question is, was it just a one-year thing for our defense? Or did we oversell how good of our coaching staff was at working magic this way? Or is it, are they able to do that same thing that they did with Zaza Pachulia and Ersan Ilyasova and Jared Dudley? It's 2 of those 3, especially not really known as being good defenders. Are they able to replicate that with the current roster?
Well, and I'm glad you brought it up. That was a big selling point for me, was just taking guys, like you said, Zaza, Ersan, Dudley. These guys weren't known for defense, but it became a team defense scheme. And I in trying to get people on board with this whole Bucks thing, and the moves that they made in the offseason, I'm going, okay, if we can get that defensively out of Zaza, even though we're bringing in a Greg Monroe, not known as a great defender, he still has a little bit more of a pulse than Zaza. He can move a little better. I thought, he can't be worse than Zaza. So, I mean, you add in the obvious upgrade on offense. I thought, okay, we're going to be, fine. We got our great defense plus what we're adding now. If that can't be replicated, as you said, that's going to be an issue this year and a problem, especially what we're paying guys like Monroe. The payroll's starting to go up. You'd hate to lose that spark that you had last year on defense.
Those were all very cerebral players, those 3, and maybe that's a key, like, to our defensive system. We were the second best defense by advanced measure in the NBA last year, both before the trading deadline and after. So we just did it in a little bit different ways, but we were second best rated, and was that predicated on Zaza and Ersan and Dudley always knowing where to be in the correct spots? I think partly yes. And will we be able to replicate that maybe with people that don't know as well?
And that was a thought I had, do the new guys need time to learn the system? But at the same time, it was a new system for everyone last year because you had a new coaching staff. So,
exactly.
The thought crossed my mind, but then the reality is that shouldn't be an excuse because last year was a new system for everyone. And I don't remember if we had any troubles defensively at the beginning of last season. I'd have to go back and look at a box score because at this point, I went into that season not really thinking or expecting anything. We kind of went into last season thinking, okay, this might be another year where we're getting a high draft pick. So early in the season, there was no pressure. I wasn't watching whether they were winning or losing. I was watching, how does Giannis look? How does Jabari look? The results were irrelevant. And then towards the middle of the season, we're looking good, and you realize, oh, hey, our defense is really good. So it'd be interesting to see if we had, and maybe you've looked back at it or not. But I hope they can figure this out.
I haven't looked back closely enough to remember, and I just don't remember exactly.
Good thing we've got a computer here, so I'm going to pull this up right now on Basketball.
I can remember the results. What I cannot remember is how good the Bucks were defensively. What I do remember from the beginning of last year is Jared Dudley being the Bucks MVP for the first 2 months, partly because of defense, but also because of offense. He was hitting threes and other jumpers in key situations. He was just playing outstanding. And
Jekyll and Hyde last
nobody
year.
was expecting that from Dudley because he had fallen out of favor in Phoenix, which is why they sent us a first-round pick in order to take him. We'll get to that later. But we also, O.J. Mayo showed up in shape and played very well for us. And Jared Bayless played extremely well for us early on. He kind of, didn't play out of character or more than he should have offensively, and defensively, I don't really think he was much. But those were the three biggest keys to our early season success. People might point to Brandon Knight, but not really. If you look at the advanced stats, I don't think so.
Well, here's a question for you guys defensively. You bring up Zaza Pachulia, Ersan Ilyasova, and Jared Dudley, who aren't well known for their defensive ability. But when you really look at it, and then you compare those guys to Chris Copeland, Johnny O'Brien, and Grievous Vasquez, do you really think that those guys project as on par defenders? Because those three, Johnny O'Brien, Chris Copeland, and especially with Johnny O'Brien being young, and Grievous Vasquez have been horrendous defensively. Like, at least the vets were able to get in the right positions, whereas Chris Copeland just does not physically seem able to, and Vasquez seems way too slow, and O'Brien just seems like he's still trying to figure out the NBA basically to get in the right spots. So I think that's a big part of it too, is those two of those guys right now just look like they're physically unable, and one of them just seems young. So I think that's really a big part of why our defense is falling. I don't think the Moose to Zaza drop-off is going to be quite as big, even though Zaza did grade out very well. But those three guys that are in our rotation right now look horrendous.
I'd have to agree completely with that.
Well, I got to say, if Johnny O'Brien and Chris Copeland are in your rotation towards the end of the season, we're probably not looking at a very successful season. But to me, those are fringe NBA players at this point. I mean, Copeland, pretty much, he had one great season as a shooter, and that was as a bench player. So
two.
Well, about one and a half, I would say.
Yeah, 1.5. One great, one good.
And Johnny O'Brien, to me, has not shown anything that shows he's an NBA player, even to me. I was surprised. I shouldn't say surprised, but I wouldn't have been surprised if he hadn't made the team this year. So, again, we have guys coming in to take those roles. Right. So that's why I'm trying to temper my doom and gloom here, because again, if I'm having to watch those guys all season, it's going to be a long season.
And ideally we're going to get Jabari and Mayo to take their spots. Like you said, hopefully, that bumps their minutes down. If they're there in a blowout, whether we're winning by a blowout or losing by a blowout, we don't want them taking meaningful minutes. They can take garbage minutes. Luke said the drop-off from Zaza to Moose hasn't not that much, and I agree. Moose has actually been one of the better players in the first two games, other than we'll get to talking about game two, but Giannis, he obviously came out with a big game. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute. So I know Luke had something to say here.
Yeah, and that's the point that I was going to make too, is so when Mayo comes back, when Jabari comes back, you're going to, the three guys we were just talking about, they're going to have a lot of their minutes replaced by players that are a lot better, and John Henson's going to be playing over Plumlee, who played in the second game. So a lot of that could be fixed, but we were talking about the coaches working magic and stuff like that. There's only so much magic that can be worked when you have Carter Williams, Middleton, and Giannis right now, who are three guys who can really defend, but then basically the 6 other guys in the rotation have no defensive talent, that it's going to be really hard for any defensive system to work with those guys. So I think when all of our players are back, you're going to see a huge increase in defensive production, or reduction of the other team's offense.
I would expect so.
Well, let's move on to Game 2. They played Washington, and it was Giannis's first game of the season after serving the 1-game suspension for rightfully punking out Mike Dunleavy Jr. Thank you. Round of applause for that.
Yeah.
He did what I think every NBA player wanted to do, and if you're Larry Sanders, he even allegedly punched him in the face while he was a teammate. So not shockingly, he was suspended, but he came back and he came out on fire. I mean, he looked every bit the superstar that we want him and think he might be.
He looked great.
It looked like he was on his way to one of those career-type nights. He ended up slowing down in the second half a little bit, but it was still good to see him pretty much taking over a game. It looked as if the Bucks were going to kind of win going away. I mean, they really started to pull away in the first half. Then in the second half, Washington starts hitting everything. I mean, contested threes. Just everything was going in for him. And lo and behold, the Bucks can't put together a complete game. They lose Game 2.
Oh no, it was really just the fourth quarter. I know Washington came back in the third quarter, but at the end of the third quarter, the Bucks were up 10.
Yeah.
And they were outscored by 15 in the fourth quarter. And that's, in the third quarter, Washington got close a little bit, but they'd go on a run, we'd go on a run. And you're right, they hit a lot of shots in the second half overall. They hit a lot of shots that I just, how did that go in? And we missed some shots, and there was a collapse. And hopefully the coaches, it's a learning moment for the young players.
Well, I mean, some of those shots that they were hitting, though, it was a function of our defense and our current kind of lack of being effective defensively. We, despite having the second best defense last year, we gave up the most corner threes in the entire NBA. And that's not something that you would expect could coincide, but it does. So the way that we rotate and just we blitz pick and rolls on every pick and roll basically. So the problem is, if we're not doing that as effectively, we're not creating as many turnovers, they're just going to get those shots, and they were hitting them.
Yeah, and I think NBA players are good enough that no defense is going to shut down a good offense forever. So you want to force the team to take worse shots. You don't want to give up the easy shots. So, like you said, we give up those corner threes, and it's a function of our defense because we're taking away potentially other shots and kind of not giving them that, but that's just the end result.
But a big problem is, Giannis played very well, even though he slowed down in the second half. Greg Monroe had another good game, and we haven't talked too much about him, but he's really played very well these first 2 games, and that's just
silently
he's just
putting up like 20 and 10.
He's not he does it in a non-exciting way. He doesn't really dunk the ball. He's not ferocious out there. He's just a big guy who just knows how to score.
And he's had some nice passes and assists as well.
Yes,
a lot,
some
offensive boards.
7 assists in the first 2 games. So
he's had good offensive boards. We brought him in. We had a problem with offensive rebounding. Rebounding in general was a problem last year for the team, and he seemed to have helped that. So I'm if we're specifically talking about Greg Monroe, right. I've been very happy with the production the first 2 games.
Yes, absolutely.
After not being all that impressed in the preseason.
Right. But so Giannis, Monroe both played well in Game 2. Michael Carter-Williams also played well in Game 2.
He played better than he played in Game 1. We'll say that.
I'll say he played well in Game 2.
I thought he had a good game in Game 2.
He played the game you want him to play.
He was maybe epically bad in Game 1.
Yeah.
So he wasn't good enough in Game 2 to wipe out how bad he was in Game 1. Because he was really bad in Game 1.
But specifically for Game 2, my concern is that with Michael Carter-Williams playing well, and you would take how he played, most people, I think, would take how he played in Game 2 and be fine with that if he always played like that. Mm-hmm. Take that, you take Giannis, you take Monroe, and we still lost.
Well, Middleton hasn't done a whole lot this year. He's got to come around.
Not yet. And there's something last year. Middleton actually got off to a bit of a slow start. Like, he played well, I think, maybe the first couple games, but then really slowed down. He got benched, actually. And really didn't take off until, I'm not sure, maybe the end of December is when he really got things going for the rest of the season. So,
yeah, one thing about Chris Middleton is it's when you're on your rookie deal still, it's okay to have those off nights and stuff, but once you get paid, you're expected to be a really good player night in, night out. And he hasn't provided that the first 2 games, so obviously you don't write off a guy after 2 games. But
no, that's it. He's done.
but you'd like to see him pick up his production and consistently get you, 15 to 25 points, hit open threes, and be a plus defensive player. And he was closer to that in game 2. He actually had a decent game, but you have to hold him to a higher standard this year than last year.
I think he's very consistent defensively. The offensive consistency is what needs to come.
Right. Well, and hopefully, we haven't talked about this yet, but Jason Kidd came out and we finally had our first official comment on Jabari Parker saying that they're expecting him back sometime in November, which is earlier than we had speculated, potentially January. There's no official date. I guess it's kind of a point where he's kind of week to week or day to day, whatever you want to call it, because we're actually in November now. But the more, he comes back, that gives us another option. Hopefully that takes some of the pressure off of the other guys as well, because each piece you're missing, that means the other pieces have to step up even more. I'm assuming whenever he does get back, his minutes are going to be severely limited until he can trust his knee and we see what he's got. But even still, just the threat of Jabari, hopefully that takes some of this pressure off down the road.
You brought up Jason Kidd. I have 2 specific bones to pick with Kidd as far as this game versus Washington is concerned. Number 1, the rotation. I'm not a big Jared Bayless fan, but I'm really, really not a fan when he's shooting us out of games late in the game. I wanted to see some more Rashad Vaughn, who looked great in the preseason. I don't know if that's a defensive thing because Kidd has this reputation of if you don't defend... Rashad Vaughn?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, Vaughn was hurt for game 2. He wasn't available.
The other thing, Damian Inglis, I would have liked to see him get more minutes. He got 3 minutes. These are the guys that I want to see playing going forward.
I had a big problem with Inglis not playing more.
And then my other big beef with Kidd was with Giannis having the game that he had in the first half, and even though he was making some mistakes and it wasn't looking as good in the second half, I would have liked to see when we started to lose that lead, feed the ball to Giannis and let him try to win this game for us, or at least dictate what's going to happen. It kind of looked like Giannis's rookie year where he was kind of just standing around towards the end.
Yep.
Call some plays for your franchise player. Not just the fact of trying to win this game, but down the line, I think that's a big opportunity that they missed to say, okay, everybody's kind of going nuts right now. Let's have you be the calming influence here, rather than the guy that's making it more hectic. So I again, instead of seeing Jared Bayless, pick and pop, shooting threes, and Gritas Vasquez shooting threes, I would like to see you get the ball or make a concerted effort to get the ball to your franchise player.
Well, and I think until Jabari comes back, Giannis is the only player on the roster right now that you can give him the ball and expect him to make something happen. Not that the other guys can't score or this or that, but he is that much of a threat.
And a matchup problem, too.
Exactly.
He's hard to find someone to guard him.
No matter who's guarding him, he's a beast. And ideally, Jabari gives you another guy in that, but we're talking down the road, second half of the season.
And in game 2 with Giannis, another frustration about not going to him, as Jake described there, is he was in a bit of foul trouble, so you kind of knew that as soon as he picks up another foul here, he's going to have to sit for a little bit. So might as well go to him now while he's still out there, and we didn't do that enough.
Mm-hmm. One thing I noticed from Giannis in the second game, so he did look like a beast, and he may have taken that next step, based off of one game. But one thing in the first half, he seemed to dominate. A lot of his buckets were off the ball things, cutting and on the break and stuff like that. So it would have been nice in the second half when things kind of slowed down. The Wizards picked up their defense and he wasn't getting those easy opportunities, if we would have given him a chance to isolate and show off that part of his game. Because as great as he was in the first half, we didn't really get to see him do a whole lot of that. And that's going forward into the future. That's what you want to see him develop, so that he can, at the end of games, isolate. He can, make other players better and also create his own opportunities. So it was disappointing that we didn't get him involved down the stretch towards the end of the game. The last, 3 or 4 minutes? was when he came back in because of the foul trouble?
Yeah.
It was near the end of the game. I don't remember exactly what point, but yeah, by then the slide was so, it was one of those things. Just watching the game, you just have that sick feeling in your gut that this thing the train's already off the tracks, and it might be too late.
Well, and credit to Washington too. I mean, they have a couple of great guards in Beal and Wall that I think most teams in the NBA would be pretty jealous pretty jealous and would trade their backcourt for.
You can't. We're going to look at it as from the standpoint of Bucks fans. We had the lead. We should win that game. But there are also professionals out there trying their best to win the game. And they were a top 4 seed last year. So it's not, it's not like we lost. We blew a 15-point lead to Philadelphia 76ers and their WNBA roster.
They're coming up next Wednesday.
Whatever you want to say, their
next
roster
home game, folks.
There you go.
If we don't win by then and we still drop that game,
fire up the tank.
Really concerned.
If we lose, if we're 0-4, we lose to Philadelphia. Is that the 4th game?
Yes.
Yeah, 4th game.
We play Monday as well.
Might as well just burn the Bradley Center and forfeit the rest of the
Yeah,
games
and start
until
watching
the
LSU games
done.
for Ben Simmons.
Let's just burn the arena to the ground, and we'll just forfeit all our games until 2018 at that point. They are a good team. So you do have to give a certain amount of credit to them because they're not going to roll over and the Bucks are up by 10. Let's let it go until there's a minute left. They're going to be in there fighting, and even at a minute left in the NBA, they're probably going to fight it.
Just as good as Wall and Beal are, and they've got some other interesting pieces. Otto Porter and Gortat's still a good player. It's just concerning to, at home with Giannis back, to lose to a team with Randy Whitman as head coach and with starting Chris Humphries with Drew Gooden and Gary Neal, significant parts of the rotation.
Yeah.
This is just concerning to me.
It's definitely concerning, and giving up 120 points, like I said back when we were talking a while ago, giving up 120 points, that's not going to fly, one way or another, and neither of these games has gone to overtime. We've given up 120 points in regulation twice. So clearly that's not going to fly, and if we gave up 120 points, that'd be, I'm assuming that'd be the NBA record for worst, most points given up in a season if we did that. I'm not sure what those Phoenix teams with Steve Nash gave up back in the day, when he's winning MVP and they gave up 115 or whatever. They'd give up 115, they'd just score 130. So I don't know, but I would imagine that'd be the worst ever. So certainly it's got to change, or we're in for a very long season and a lot of dark podcasts in the future.
So one thing I want to say about, since we're on the subject of Washington, and you guys brought up Bradley Beal, did any of you guys get to watch Washington's first game?
I didn't get a chance to see them.
So I know this is a Bucks cast, but Bradley Beal has become one of my top 10 favorite players because
I'm a huge fan of Bradley.
Yeah, they had an interview with him, and he said he only wants to shoot 3-pointers, score in the lane, and go to the foul line this year. He has tried to swear off long twos, and in the first game, he took a long two accidentally where he stepped on the line, and he lost it on the court and was screaming at himself, which was hilarious. But
he's the anti-Scott Skiles player.
The point is I really hope we try to stress that with our young guards, too, especially Rashad Vaughn, because I think that's awesome and an awesome approach for him to take.
That is a great approach. I mean, that's the philosophy that Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey takes with the whole organization. That's all they want to do is layup stunks, free throw attempts, and threes. That's it. And efficiency-wise, it makes sense.
It's the new Moneyball approach for the NBA, I think. It's the old game was, get it into the post, take it to your mid-range shooters and that. But it's not only more efficient, I think, but I think it's more exciting to watch, too.
Yeah,
it can be. I will say Houston in particular can be a little tough to watch with how many free throws that Dwight Howard and James Harden.
You don't like watching them shoot 65 free throws a game?
Not particularly.
Yeah, some of the playoff games last year were. I was watching. I don't watch Houston during the regular season. Maybe they're on a TNT Thursday night game or whatever. You catch them now and then. I don't have league pass or anything, but some of those playoff games were very brutal to watch.
It's interesting because I don't particularly like to watch Houston. I'm a big fan of James Harden, but yeah, it can be a little tough to watch, but it makes sense for winning. And when that's your team and when you are winning, it does seem more exciting to you. I will tell you that.
I would.
We haven't had a lot of that around here.
If Giannis, Jabari, and Monroe combined for 60 free throw attempts in a game and we won, I'd be quite all right with it.
Best basketball ever.
Yeah, I would do a 180. I'd be the biggest hypocrite ever, and I'd say that was the greatest one I've ever seen.
Look, the trend in the NBA is definitely going that way, and especially when it comes to 3-pointers. Chuck mentioned earlier, the Mike D'Antoni Phoenix Suns teams. The league now averages more 3-point attempts than that 2004 Phoenix Suns team did.
Yeah, no, I'm
average.
I'm well aware. That the game in the last 10 years has really shifted quite a bit towards 3-point
that's
shooting.
one concern with the Bucks, of course, because you can say like, oh, we have some players on our roster who can shoot threes. We've got a rookie, Rashad Vaughn, OJ Mayo, Chris Middleton, and maybe Giannis has started to get a 3-point shot, but the problem is our key players that we have out there surrounding a low post player like Greg Monroe, who is not a jump shooter. Michael Carter-Williams, Chris Middleton, Jabari Parker, and Giannis. You don't really. It's not like.
That's not Golden State,
no,
where every guy can
it's
bomb.
Not even Orlando, how you have the low post guy with 4 shooters around him. It's going to be very interesting to see how that actually works.
Yeah, and they showed those stats last year. The 4 teams that were the final 4 teams, and then the Clippers, who got eliminated the round before, were the all 5 top 3-point shooting teams. And that's one of the arguments I think that really holds water for Michael Carter-Williams potentially not being the long-term solution, because when you have a point guard who can't shoot, you may never be able to do that, and if that continues to be a big factor in success, that could.
It's a big factor because people do. I've seen and heard a lot of people say, "Oh, well, this guy can shoot, so that makes up for it." Well, you can only have 5 players on the court at one time.
Yep. You can have the best 3-point shooting bench in the league, but if they're on the bench, it's irrelevant. So.
It'll help you, but you want those. You really have to focus in the NBA. Your 5 key guys that are going to play the most minutes. That's the biggest key. The bench is a big key too, but that's something that the Bucks will have to think about.
Well, and that's we're off to an 0-2 start. It's obviously early, but having a bad season and getting a top draft pick would not be the worst thing to happen to this team.
Yeah, I'm a fan of some of the prospects coming out.
I know Jake is always looking at prospects, and he's always okay. I mean, at some point you have to win, and we're only 2 games in, so I'm not saying this is the season at all. But there are worse things. I don't want to be mediocre again. I want to either at the end of the year be a good team and excited heading into the playoffs like we were last year, or I want to be getting a top draft pick. I don't want to be the Herb Cole era.
Well, unfortunately, I think that if things don't go well this season, we're not quite going to be bad enough to get a top draft pick.
You might be right, because the East is so bad that we may be stuck in that place.
Well, there's a couple bad teams out west too. I mean,
that is true. Overall, the East is worse than the West.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You said maybe adding a core piece wouldn't be the worst thing, so watch this segue. Let's talk about some of the young cores in the NBA, including our own Milwaukee Bucks. This was a great topic, I think, that Luke had suggested, but in the last preseason game, we saw arguably the top young core in the NBA in the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think the Bucks are right up there. There's some other teams, Utah, Orlando, New Orleans, and maybe some people would argue Philadelphia, although I think a lot of people don't really know what the hell they have in Philadelphia, if you consider upcoming draft picks part of your core. But I want to break it down to just us in Minnesota, and it's an interesting argument of who has the top young core in the NBA. There's many different kinds of arguments you can make here. Is it a matter of depth and how many young guys you have, or you could rate it as just who are your blue chip prospects and who are those top guys? So I think it's pretty obvious, us versus Minnesota. There's 4 guys in the mix here. You've got Andrew Wiggins, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jabari Parker, and Karl Anthony Towns as all the blue chippers, and then the other guys kind of fall in for maybe your secondary type young core pieces. But I'll just ask it right off the back. Luke, who has the best young core in the NBA, specifically between Milwaukee and Minnesota?
I think it's Minnesota. I was talking about this the other day. I think if you look at the prospects, Karl Anthony Towns is the best prospect of all of the prospects.
I would agree, and here's the thing about him. I think it's going to take a long time for people to really recognize how great he truly can be, because he is not a loud personality. He's not a Kevin Garnett or somebody that's going to jump out, but man, can he just do it all.
I saw a quote the other day that he is probably the only number one draft pick in the last 15 to 20 years that was severely underrated coming out of college, because they didn't, there were some people who were high on him, but there wasn't a ton of media like, oh my gosh, this guy is going to be like the greatest. And you see him play and you're like, holy cow, this guy's probably going to be the best center
for such
league.
A young guy, too.
Right. And I think a lot of that's because he played on such a stacked team. Like, I remember watching him play against Wisconsin, and I'm like, oh, another one of those giant 7'2" guys, because they have like 6 of them, blocked another shot. Was that him, or was that a different guy? So I think he kind of got lost in the shuffle there. But he really is the complete package. And, I'd put him as a tier 1 prospect, and I'd say that Wiggins, Giannis, and Jabari are all just below him. I will say that I think right now Giannis is probably the second best prospect out of those guys, even though I could see any of those 3 kind of rising above the other one. And I'd have to put, as much as I love Jabari, and I personally, when they were rookies, I like Jabari more than Wiggins. But after Jabari's knee injury, I think you have to put him 4th until he comes back
and proves
really,
that he's
you really
the
see
same
what
guy.
he has. So that's my opinion on it. I'll turn it over to Dan and see what he has to say.
I actually can't disagree with anything that Luke just said there. I am very, very high on Karl Anthony Towns. I think, out of young, up-and-coming superstar players, Anthony Davis is already there, and I don't think Karl Anthony Towns is on that same level, but he's right below that, Karl Anthony Towns. And so that's the biggest key right there is, having that transcendent kind of player. And I do think Giannis could be, we'll see, but I've seen enough from Karl Anthony Towns. Unless he gets derailed by injuries, I'm expecting that.
Yep.
From him.
A lot of people compare him to Tim Duncan, and right away you want to say, well, that's a ridiculous comparison. Tim Duncan's arguably one of the best 3 to 5 players that's ever played. But this is a guy who's 19 years old. Right. Duncan came in the league at 22 years old. So if you want to talk about Karl Anthony Towns at 22 and then tell me that the Duncan comparison is ridiculous, okay. But
look at Anthony Davis at 22, what he is now, compared to what he was when he came in the league.
Sure. I think barring injury, Davis versus Towns is the next Garnett Duncan. Basically.
Could be.
Very few players come in as rookies and totally dominate. Kevin Durant he looked... Not that he looked bad as a rookie, but he was kind of a chucker, and he's come a long way. Very rarely do you have someone who comes in. LeBron was pretty dominant right from the start. But even he, as a rookie, had his struggles. So, yeah, I think if we're going over, it's very close between Minnesota and Milwaukee. And obviously my heart says Milwaukee, and I want Giannis and Jabari to hit their potential. But I think if you want to be honest about it, I think we're all in agreement here that Minnesota probably has a slightly better young core than the Bucks. And that's not meant as a slight to Milwaukee. We all love the Milwaukee Bucks.
Isn't.
We all love the Milwaukee Bucks core. It's really you're splitting hairs at this point in time. It's they both have the potential to in the next 5 years be meeting in the finals because they're in the Western Conference, we're in the Eastern Conference. Hopefully we're settling this on the court in the finals in the next 5 years.
It is something though that when I think the Bucks as an organization and Bucks fans sometimes get ahead of themselves and think we're in a lot better position than we are. You do have to look relative to the rest of the league, and there are other teams with really good young cores.
Right.
Minnesota, the others that were mentioned, New Orleans, just by virtue of having Anthony Davis, and he's 22 years old, and if they actually decide to properly rebuild, they can still put a great team around him. And then, of course, you have the already established teams in the league. So there's a lot for the Bucks to compete with. And when we come up and are theoretically ready to compete for championships, there's a couple other teams that are going to be right there as well. And Minnesota looks like it's going to be the most difficult opponent at this stage.
So here's a question that I was asking the other day when I was talking about this. the Western Conference has been stacked for quite some time, and it looks like it's going to be stacked going forward. And there are some good young cores in the East, but it seems like historically the past 10 years or so, the West is always better. Do you consider that at all when you look at a core? Do you think, well, our core might be slightly worse than Minnesota's, but that's okay because we're going to play in a weaker conference? Like, does that factor in?
I mean, in theory, the West has obviously been a lot stronger than the East for a long time, and part of that is due to the very unfortunate lottery system that the NBA has for the draft. Like, you put everybody that hasn't made the playoffs, 8 in each conference, you put the non-playoff teams into the lottery, and just by virtue of that, whether they win a top 3 pick or not, they're picking higher than
a playoff team with the worst record.
Yeah, teams in the East with that. So you just keep funneling more and more talent into the Western Conference. It's a broken system, and there are just some organizations that have for a long time been better. I mean, look, the Spurs, and I did want to mention this from the last Buck Life podcast. I do have to say that when Tim Duncan retires, the Spurs are not done.
No,
they have a lot. I mean, LaMarcus Aldridge, who they just signed up with a promise from Greg Popovich that he will remain coaching for the length of LaMarcus Aldridge's contract. Kawhi Leonard. I mean, just those two right there.
Kyle Anderson, another guy that's maybe a Lamar Odom, Boris Diaw type player.
Right. So the Spurs aren't conceivably going to be going anywhere for
They're
a while.
so annoying. They just churn out these late first round picks that just turn into guys that kill you.
That you have to value, and the Spurs manage to think long term at the same time as short term, where other teams that should be thinking long term don't necessarily do that.
They kind of buck the trend of either you're rebuilding or you're competing, and it seems like they just do it on the fly.
Look how they got Kawhi Leonard. I mean, they had George Hill, a productive backup point guard. Tim Duncan was really like, no, don't trade him, and R.C. Buford and Greg Popovich were like, no, we have to make this trade, and that's how they got Kawhi Leonard.
Yep.
And then that's one thing that concerns me with the Bucks. We're getting ahead of ourselves doing trades like.
What you mean? First round pick for Grievous Vasquez?
Round
what are you talking about?
Pick for Grievous Vasquez. Yeah, these things concern
me. I think we're all still salty about that pick. I don't think anyone in this room was happy with it from the start, and after seeing 2 games into the season, I don't think anyone has changed their tune on that. Real quickly, I just wanted to go Luke's question in terms of being in a weaker conference. Does that factor into the core? For me, it doesn't factor into the core. The core is what it is. I'm just going to compare player to player. But it certainly won't hurt in terms of making the playoffs, making the finals. You have
easier path.
As much as
look at Cleveland right now.
Yeah, look at Cleveland in the NBA right now. Look at the New England Patriots in the NFL. As great as Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, and that team has been, the NFC or the AFC East has been garbage. They've had 6 games against the Jets, the Buffalo Bills, and the Miami Dolphins every year. It certainly doesn't hurt in terms of maybe you don't have to go as hard in the regular season. You can save yourself more for the playoffs. You're going to get a higher seed, more games at home, whatever the case may be. But in terms of comparing core to core, that doesn't really affect. It'll impact the potential on-court experience, though.
One thing I was thinking about these 2 teams in particular, and these 4 players in particular, is one of the knocks on Wiggins coming out of college was that he's this quiet, kind of collected guy. He may not necessarily be that alpha dog, give me the ball, I'm going to score it kind of guy. And there were some people saying the same thing about Karl Anthony Towns, where maybe he's just kind of the unwilling, top number 1 pick. Then you look at Giannis and Jabari, and I think a lot of people look at those 2 personalities and say, well, those guys could both be your alpha dogs. So maybe that kind of swings it in our favor a little bit, if that turns out to be true, that we have these 2 personalities that want to be late game, go-to scorers or closers, that versus 2 guys that maybe they have to defer or are not comfortable in that role. So I mean that definitely works in our favor. I think
that could very well factor in.
But we also have to talk about the secondary cores and kind of where they fall into and how the teams are constructed around these blue chippers. We listed for the Bucks. We'll put Greg Monroe. He's 25, so we'll say 25 and under kind of will be the cutoff age. So you have Greg Monroe, Michael Carter-Williams, Rashad Vaughn, and John Henson, I think, as the key young guys that are going to be the role players around the Blue Chippers.
No Johnny O'Brien in there?
Anyways, then, okay, for Minnesota, you have Ricky Rubio, Shabazz Muhammad, Tyus Jones, and I keep wanting to say Zach LaVine. But as far as the secondary cores, this is where I'm going to favor Milwaukee. Just because I think we have guys that are more carved into these roles and they know exactly what those roles are going to be. With Minnesota, you have a lot of scoring. I don't see a ton of defense. There's not a lot of big man depth there. Ricky Rubio, he does sway it a little bit in their favor. I mean, God, if we could somehow trade Michael Carter-Williams for Ricky Rubio, I would be. You couldn't remove the smile on my face. We were saying there was a stat today that Minnesota was shooting 49.5% with Ricky Rubio on the floor and about 35% with him off the floor. So, I mean, that shows you what a smart, savvy point guard can do for your team. But overall, I think Minnesota has the explosive athletes. Wiggins, otherworldly athlete. I mean, Giannis is no slouch. Jabari's no slouch when he's healthy, but Wiggins can just jump out of the gym. He's fast as, I think they said, Chris Paul on the floor. Mm-hmm. He is the key in this whole debate to me because he has a skill level that I don't think any of these guys can touch, but it's all mentality with him. Is he going to be able to take on the role of being, or saying, I want to be the best player in the NBA? Could it happen for him? Yes. Will it? I don't know.
Well, if we're going to talk about the second tier guys, I definitely think out of the four you mentioned for Milwaukee, the four you mentioned for Minnesota, Rubio, or five, whatever it was, yeah.
Middleton wasn't mentioned.
How did we forget Middleton?
Yeah, he didn't mention Middleton.
My bad, yo.
Wasn't mentioned.
Yeah, I think Rubio.
It was because you said Johnny O'Brien. It threw me off.
Yeah, you got thrown off with Johnny O'Brien. I think Rubio is probably has the biggest impact out of all those guys, just because of his abilities as a point guard. So that probably gives a slight edge right off the bat to Minnesota, but I agree with you that after that, Milwaukee has the edge there for now. And things could change. Next year, we could have a completely different discussion there. Possibly,
but I mean, for me, it isn't really close because of Rubio. I mean, if you even go Giannis, Jabari, Middleton compared to Karl Anthony Towns, Wiggins, and Rubio. And I know Rubio's 25, so he's older than those guys, but he just makes such a difference, and he's going to get his guys the ball. Towns and Wiggins, he's going to get them the ball. He's an excellent defender, and he's starting to improve his jump shot. So I think that's just the biggest difference, and they're secondary guys as well. I'm not a big Zach LaVine guy, but Shabazz and Tyus Jones and even Gorgie Jang, they've got some good young players. They really do.
Yeah, I'm not a big Tyus Jones fan personally. I think he's a little undersized.
We'll see what.
But yeah, we'll see what he does.
We have Tyler Ennis too, who could eventually turn into a little something also.
That's true. It's crazy to me that Rubio is 25 because I swear he was drafted 13 years ago. He played in Europe for like 8 years, and then he finally came over to Minnesota 2 years ago, and. I swear he was drafted in 2003 in the LeBron draft, if I recall. If memory serves correct.
Hardcore NBA fans have been tracking Ricky Rubio since he was 17, and he's only 25, but that is 8 years.
That is true. It feels even longer than 8 years to me.
And I think him and Steph Curry are probably the most fun players to watch in the NBA. Giannis, when he's on, can be included in that group, but Rubio is just... God, he has that Pistol Pete in his game where he can make the flashy plays, and when they, it's going to be cool to see him running with Wiggins and Towns and these guys. Because
let's hope he doesn't partake in the cocaine and stuff like.
Rest in peace.
Yeah,
rest in Pete. Okay, but I just want to add that what a great debate to have, though, that we can sit here and say that the Bucks have arguably the top core, if not one of the top two young cores in the NBA, because. God, it feels like just yesterday when we were talking about Corey Maggette and John Salmons and Drew Gooden and
we were all chipping in
Samuel Dallenberg
down at the down on 43.
A lot has changed in a little over a year.
Yeah, yes. The last 2 years, about a year and a half. It was about a year and a half ago that the ownership group was announced, and and so the last 18 months really. we've gone from having Giannis was really the only piece of our core at that point in time to having one of the best up-and-coming cores, a new arena going to break ground. Even though we're 0-2, I think we're all still optimistic about the future. Maybe not so much.
If we can add, I'm just saying, Ben Simmons or Brandon Ingram, that'd probably push us over the top to be the top young core. I'm just saying.
And not only players on the court in the arena, we've also added Johnson & Johnson, who've sounded fantastic the first.
Oh God, yes, thank you for bringing it up.
The broadcasting
that was
team,
good.
They came out firing on all cylinders. I've got no real complaints.
And they're only going to get better.
Like I said, the second game I unfortunately was at I compromised. My wife is not a basketball fan, so we went to a bar where she could get some good craft beers, and I could watch the game but no sound. But the first game I went over to where Jake works, and we watched the game with some sound at that bar. Up to you if you want to name drop or not.
I'm good.
So we were there watching the game. So they
only did game one.
Yeah, okay. Like I said, I didn't have sound for game two, so I didn't get
my
to watch
biggest
it.
complaint. I want a schedule that tells me each and every game that Gus Johnson and Marcus Johnson do. I'd watch every game. Period, but it'll help.
I wish we could have traded.
It'll help me to get other people excited to watch a road game.
They said that they're signed on for what 20
or 25
Gus
games.
Johnson is 20 games. Marcus Johnson is 55.
Okay.
Jim Paschke is 55 games. John McLaughlin is 25 games. There will be some 3-man booths with Paschke, McLaughlin, and.
Are there any other teams in the league that do the rotating announcers thing? That seems pretty unique. I guess that I don't.
There's guys who do national gigs, and they'll step out for a national gig and then come back to their regular team. I know that for a fact. I don't know how many do that, but
there aren't. I mean, we are in rare company. The Bucks are, because the Brooklyn Nets have national guys as well as the New York Knicks, and as stands right now, that's it. Yep. And the Bucks now have. If you want to consider Gus Johnson a national guy, which I do.
He is.
Yep,
he is. I don't think he does national NBA, but he does national football, the college hoops. I think he does college football as well.
Yes, he does.
So he's definitely a national guy, even if not for the NBA specifically.
I heard an interview with him today, too, where they asked him if he wanted this to be a long-term thing, and he said that he does. I don't think he wants to be a full-time
He cut his teeth with the Knicks back in the day. That was one of his first broadcasting
on the
gigs
radio.
On the radio with the Knicks. So... and he certainly, to me, even though I've enjoyed him in football, both Big Ten games, NFL, it certainly seems to me that basketball might be his passion, and I don't know. I'm kind of assuming based on interviews I've heard.
It is.
It seems to me that he enjoys the basketball the best.
He liked the basketball.
Yeah. So.
Hey, Brent.
Hey, we gotta. We're about to wrap up here, but Brent can say hi here. He just walked in.
Brent, who you got? Hi. Better core, Minnesota or Milwaukee?
Putting you on the spot. Yeah, and you don't even get to hear what the four of us said.
I'm going to go just based on Jake slaughtering me in NBA 2K that Minnesota has the better core.
Yeah, we all picked Minnesota as well,
okay.
So you're right on board. But I don't know if we have anything else left on the agenda. That's kind of Jake's
No,
deal
I want to end on my note that Ben Simmons would push us over the top. So just throwing that out there.
You're starting the tango?
No, I don't. Well, we're playing. We're tipping off in about 7 or 10 minutes here.
Let's get about 10-15 games into the season, then we can decide if we want to fire up the tank.
I'll say about 10-15 minutes into this next game. I'll tell you
if we still haven't won after Wednesday's game at home against Philadelphia, then
we're all on the tank. Okay, we're deciding.
We're rolling up to the Bradley Center like DX.
Yeah, 0-4.
0-5. That would be up. We have tonight, Monday, and Wednesday. So
who do we play tomorrow? I haven't looked at this.
Brooklyn Nets.
Brooklyn tomorrow. Okay, so yeah, if we're 0-5 with losses, I mean, some of those are playoff teams. Toronto's a playoff team. The Wizards were a playoff team, but losing to 3 non-playoff teams, including the 76ers.
Well, we're supposed to be a playoff team. I just have to say.
Well, yes, and that is true. So,
and in the meantime, just Google Ben Simmons highlights.
So I guess that's it. We will be coming to your sound waves soon in the near future. Everyone have a good one and go Bucks.
Buck life.